Welcome, everyone, to the 30-minute Midas touch from beautiful Dyersburg, Tennessee at the Herb Welsh WrestlePlex. Now, here is, pound for pound and inch for inch, the best of the best in professional wrestling today. A wrestling genius worth his weight in gold. The Golden Boy, Greg Anthony.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 30-minute Midas touch. I am your host, the Golden Boy, Greg Anthony, and with me is my co-host, Mr. Multimedia, Mark Tipton.
Mr. Multimedia. Well, I certainly appreciate a new accolade for me again this week. I don't know if I quite qualify for all of that, but I did consume my fair share of media this week because I wanted to prepare myself as best I could. We've talked about in the past how voluminous the amount of professional wrestling that's available to watch is for the average wrestling fan, which I count myself among those. And what I did is I attempted to, in preparation for today, just kind of consume everything that was produced this week in essentially one sitting. And because what we want to talk about today is kind of a current events version of the 30-minute Midas Touch podcast. I think everyone understands that where we want to start this discussion is what was probably the biggest news item or blooper reel, depending on your perspective on it, and that was AEW's decision to headline their most recent pay-per-view with a exploding barbed wire match and how it turned out in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody that's listened to this program probably any length of time knows that I am not going to be a fan of this concept at all. And this is kind of the way I explain it to my guys is, so ladder matches have ladders. Cage matches have cages. Death matches don't have death. If anything, like we were talking about it yesterday, actually it'd more be like near-death matches, because that would be more apt, right? Because it's a near-death experience for a lot of them. So to me, because wrestling's all about selling what you're fixing to do, or selling the match, or selling your opponent, or whatever it is. So if you're trying to sell a match, and you're going to call it a death match. Well, you're not going to be able to pay off with that. So you're already starting yourself behind the eight ball. All right, so let's get that out of the way first. Obviously, I don't like death matches. I don't like the concept that this is the main event of your pay-per-view, that you're trying to tell everybody you're a sports-based product. We keep going back to that because that's what they said when they started. They were going to be a sports-based product, and no matter how far they get away from that, that's what they told us they were going to be. Yeah. So here we are, year and a half, 2 years later, whatever it is, and we're having a exploding ring death match or whatever it is, and I didn't see the match. I'm not going to sit here and say a lot of people said it was a really great match up until, and that's another problem too. Like, only thing people remember half the time is the finish, right? So it doesn't matter if you have the greatest match ever. If your finish is fucked, then the match is fucked. And in this case, it was the main event of this pay-per-view, so it means the pay-per-view is pretty much screwed too. You understand? So like, the whole theatrics behind the exploding ring, like when they do it in Japan, obviously, it's a big deal, and like it looks violent. It looks like, how do these guys are going to survive this? You know what I mean? Well, this ended up being like a sparkler show, and everybody immediately jumped on it. It was great to see everybody just finally unify and go, well, yeah, that was the shits. But like the one of the main problems I had was, AEW as a company, when you make a mistake like that, you have to own up to it. You can't. But everybody from the AEW camp has just been making excuse after excuse after excuse. Like, oh, it wasn't because we skimped on money. It was explosions are unpredictable and blah, blah, blah. They're just trying to make all these different excuses. Well, at the end of the day, it's your job, and you failed at your job. So someone needs to own up to that and just try to move forward from there. But yeah, I'm not a fan of the exploding ring. I'm not a fan of AEW doing that. I'm not a fan of their handling of the situation in the aftermath.
Well, okay, you actually went into a couple of aspects of this that really caught my attention. Because as you were talking, you mentioned you have death matches don't have actual death. Beyond that, we have an exploding barbed wire match that's really not quite so explosive. It was more of a sparkle shower, kind of like when Shawn Michaels used to come out. There would be Christian would and who is also in very much in the news that we need to get to at some point during this conversation. And so really that was what you sold the audience on. Now, in fairness, I did not watch this event either, although I'm tempted to just because of the newsworthy and I would say somewhat ironically historical to professional wrestling history that this was. But that was what was being sold, was that the explosion part, and then that doesn't happen. So have you really left a bad taste in the mouth of the fans when the talent in the ring, and I heard the same accounts you did, every account I heard or read indicated that the match itself was tremendous that Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega put together, to their credit. Do you think it's a danger from the business aspect to not deliver for the paying audience who paid pay-per-view, I believe is $50 or something like that, to watch this event?
Yeah, that's a huge issue. I mean, like, back in, it's $60 actually.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, $60 for an AEW pay-per-view. And meanwhile, you're going to be able to get WWE pay-per-views for $5 a month through Peacock, right? So you're telling fans that your product is worth 12 times more than the WWE, right? Whether they actually believe that or not, or whether that's their intention, just from the pricing standpoint alone, that's what you're telling your fans and your fan base, right? So when they plop down $60 to watch this pay-per-view, and you underdeliver, that's a huge issue. Like I always feel like, and that's something I've always kind of been proud of with our company, is I always feel like when it comes time for those big matches or those big moments or those big shows, we knock it out of the park. We try to deliver as much as we can. So like, it's a huge issue, and it's got to start from the top. Like Tony Khan, like we said before, maybe the nicest guy in the world. He seems to be the most generous guy in the world. But as far as having wrestling acumen, professional wrestling acumen to be the president of a national company like this, it's embarrassing to see some of the stuff that they've done and come up with.
All right, and we discussed their handling of the situation. As I watched the AEW product this week, it seemed to me that their decided response to this was going to be just kind of make light of it as best they could. On Dynamite, they directly referenced that it did not go off very well, and how the involvement of Eddie Kingston really looked ridiculous as he throws himself on Jon Moxley on a very unimpressive fireworks display that, and how it really made everyone look bad. They seem to want to just handle it almost in kind of a, hey, laugh it off kind of thing. Do you think that would be better than not acknowledging it at all?
I mean, me personally, I would make some veiled reference to it, but I would not put any more weight behind it. You try to get that as far out of sight and out of mind as you could possibly be to your fan base. Okay, time to move on. Do something else and get them off of it and start talking about something else. Because let's face it, that thing is going to live in infamy forever. You understand? Now that it's happened, it's going to be one of those bloopers or those what are they called?
The
botch.
Botch, yes.
Sorry.
That'll make a botch video.
Yeah, that's going to be one of the biggest botches in wrestling history now.
Yeah, Botchamania.
Botchamania,
yes.
For sure. Yeah, I mean it's obviously, and just like you said, Kingston's reaction. Poor Eddie Kingston. He's laying on top of Moxley, doing his job like he's supposed to be doing. He can't see what's going on around him as far as what to sell. It's not his job to pyrotechnic the whole thing. So he's just laying there doing his job, and then he sells it like it was the explosion of the century. And then it comes out and it was a fart. He doesn't realize that. No one's smart enough. That's the stupid thing too. Is like no one in the ring smartened him up and said, "Hey man, that was the shit. You need to, don't sell this like you're selling it." You know what I mean?
Right. Even to the point of Excalibur on the microphone yelling, "Oh God," or something of that nature. I heard a clip of it, and I guess he felt obligated to respond as though he was saying what was intended.
Yeah, and that's why people don't understand. Like, we talk about Jim Ross having credibility. No one cares about their own credibility anymore. You understand? That's why people didn't plan out a lot of stuff, because they didn't want, like Jerry Lawler always talked about, he didn't go to production meetings because he was afraid they would tell him something because he needed to react genuinely to it, and he was afraid he wouldn't be able to do that if he knew exactly what was going on. And there were certain situations where, like, someone was supposed to be levitating, but they never rigged it up right to where it didn't work, so it didn't actually happen. But Michael Cole was calling it like she was still levitating, because that's what he had heard in the production meeting. You understand? Like, your mind, oh, they're levitating. Oh, no, they're not. Look at them. See what I'm saying? Like, call what's right in front of your eyes. Have the credibility to the audience, and that'll always work.
All right. That example kind of mentions something that I wanted to kind of maybe fantasy book. I will say, as a side note, very quickly, I did read that this pay-per-view did very well for AEW. It was allegedly one of their highest in terms of pay-per-view buys, and had a very good gate, or however you want to define pay-per-view. The receipts looked really good. My only question is, if you drew in that larger audience and then left them with that bad impression, are those people going to think twice the next time?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I actually posted something about this on my Facebook this week. Was, there's lots of guys in professional wrestling that look like $1 million. You know what I mean? That are in phenomenal shape. You put them on a poster, and people are going to pay money to see them. But once people get in the door, it's your job to sell them on yourself and your company as a professional wrestler to have return business, right? And so many guys nowadays, and this is the same with AEW, you may get them in the door, but can you keep them? Are you giving them a product that's good enough to keep them coming back for more? And, if I paid $60 for this and that was the match I got and the finish, I don't think I'd buy another $60. I'd probably maybe go to a buddy's house if he had it or something like that, but I wouldn't physically do it myself anymore. And that kind of stuff adds up. You know what I mean? Like, we're talking about, and even in the heyday of pay-per-view and things like that, like, 300,000 buys, 400,000 buys, those were pretty successful pay-per-views. They weren't WrestleMania type pay-per-views, but those were still pretty successful numbers, right? So, I don't think they're anywhere near that. No. So it's going to be more like in the 20,000, 50,000 maybe, 60,000 at the most, I would think. But I could be wrong. We'll get a number.
Well, there were online allegations of higher. However much stock you want to put into those.
How much higher?
The one I read referenced just over 100,000 buys.
Maybe that's possible. But still, like that right there would have been like WWE Great American Bash 2008 number. You know what I mean? Like, that's still not anywhere near like what it should be. You know what I mean? So, like, I just think they're working off an old business model.
Okay. Just to stay on this subject a little bit longer, because it did capture my attention a great deal. And that is, I will admit, I thought maybe this match in particular, and it's unfortunate that we're almost setting aside the rest of the pay-per-view, because the event, the happenings in the main event kind of overshadowed everything else that went on. And that's somewhat unfair to the other talent, but it is the main event for a reason. And I was kind of thinking of this from a fantasy booking aspect, I suppose. I was trying to think of how could this have been successful. And I want to make an argument and see how you respond to this. I thought this may have been a victim, or well, it may have been a good situation for what has come to be known as the cinematic match. And here's my argument. This was a live event. Tony Khan appeared on radio shows, I believe Busted Open, among others, I heard him on, in which he was proud that they were going to have larger numbers of people at Daly's Place for the live event, is the way I heard it described. And obviously having fans back is something that I very much want to see. I miss this dearly. It has adversely affected my enjoyment of professional wrestling products just watching as a fan. So he had that on one hand. But on the other hand, because of the unpredictable nature of something like an exploding barbed wire match, could this match have worked if they had done it as a cinematic style match?
I mean, that's a good argument. Like for me though, like I don't ever want to see a cinematic match. I don't. I think that having a great cinematic match is just like having a bad B movie. Like why even try? Wrestling is its own specific art form, and I think it should stay in that realm. And we've found situations where because like you said, because of the no fans and they're having a little leeway as far as filming these matches go, because they don't have a live audience to take into account. Like with Edge and Orton, they were able to, let's reshoot this, let's reshoot that. We didn't get, let's see if we can do this a little better. Blah, blah, blah. And that's when Edge ended up getting hurt, right? So to me, just the risk alone isn't worth it. Like I don't want it to become so that unbelievably phony that we can go, cut, take two. If something goes wrong, like I don't ever want that to become the norm in professional wrestling. So like, I hope that's not ever where it goes. But like I said, cinematic matches are a thing we're gonna cover at one point. We're gonna cover in a one whole episode. But I don't want to see that at all.
All right. Well, my argument was based upon because so much was hanging on the exploding aspect that I thought. But they had a live audience there. And I will say this, and I want to be fair as I can, in defense of AEW and Tony Khan, they did have the Sting match, which was essentially cinematic. Yeah. And so maybe having two of that style on the same pay-per-view.
Yeah, well, it's just I don't want it, it's like cutting your nose off to spite your face. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to do a cinematic match just because, it'd be easier because we got this big explosion at the end. No, if you're going to have an explosion, let's have an explosion and make sure it goes right. You understand? Like what the fun of wrestling is working within these parameters. If you can just go out there and do anything and nothing makes sense, then anyone can do it, right? Or supposedly.
And I have heard that.
Yeah, and that's completely wrong. Like working within the confines of the storytelling and the real world parameters is what makes it great.
All right. Well, thank you for indulging me on that. This subject did capture my attention as a fan a great deal. But we do need to turn to a subject which I do not enjoy. I do not look forward to discussing, but it was a part of the wrestling news of the week, and that is the events surrounding the current or former professional wrestler known as Joseph Ryan.
Okay, I didn't like Joey Ryan. Okay, let me start over. I liked Joey Ryan years ago when he was just this sleazy looking character, But the minute the dick flipped happened and the porn, sponsorship and like all this kind of really overly sexualized professional wrestling stuff started, I completely checked out. Now me and Matt, we had a run in with Joey Ryan before the dick flip stuff, which he did something I believe was completely unprofessional, and almost severely injured somebody. Who would think that Joey Ryan would do something like that? But he did something like that, and like I just turned off on him. Then I was hot. Then like we almost got into a fight then, but like. Joey Ryan, like when all this stuff came out about the speaking out movement and things like that came out, there was a lot of guys that were thrown under the bus with that. Like besides that, but yeah, Joey Ryan, like it turned out that he was, guess what, guys? He was a horrible human being. Who would have known this guy that only gave two shits about himself and not the wrestling business as a whole, would actually turn out to be such a dipshit. But here's the thing, like everyone said when it happens, he's done, he'll never wrestle again, he'll never do this, and I knew it. I said give it a year and he's going to get back somehow. He's going to either try to get booked or one of his buddies out in Southern California is going to book him or something's going to happen. Sure enough, almost a year to the day, he tries to do an event in Knoxville. It turns out it's his event, which is mind-blowing too, right? So he tries to do his own event. It's called Charity for Women, right? And he puts himself on the poster. Now, this can be looked at as a couple different ways. Like, either one, he's so egotistical to think, I'm trying to get back in the business, but I'm going to go ahead and I need to put my face on the poster. Like, why not not put your face on the poster and just let the show run, and maybe you're there and see how people react to you then. But no, he puts his face on the poster. So that's one. The other theory is that he's doing this on purpose to show people, because he has some court cases going on where he's suing these women that have cost him his career, right? So maybe he's doing this to show the courts, hey, look, I tried to run a show, I tried to make a living, and I got canceled. I got canceled immediately just for having my picture on a poster. You know what I mean? So he could be trying to make his own case for himself, But either way, like we said, Joey Ryan is a piece of shit. You know what I mean? He's done so much damage to the overall presentation of professional wrestling. We're still having to fight back from the damage he caused before.
All right. I guess what I will do is, I did mention being fair earlier, so let me try this. I did at least read, and he has released some, I believe it's on Twitter or something, he released some statements that he would or has dropped at least some of the lawsuits he had going as a result of the speaking out allegations and so forth. And he indicated this was part of his recovery. He has, according to what I read, he has entered a 12-step program for his addiction. And that part of this was...
What addiction is that, Mark Tipton?
He is allegedly joined and is going to weekly meetings for a group that is referred to as and I hope I get this right, the Sex and Love Addiction Anonymous is the organization.
Yeah, someone's a pervert, or someone's trying to force themselves on women, and they're a sex addict. They're not just a rapist pervert. So like, whatever. He's gonna try to spin it any way he can, because I don't think he has any other qualifications to go out and, do anything of worth. What else is he gonna do? Is he gonna run the local Home Depot? I don't know. I mean, I seriously doubt he can build anything, because he's more apt at tearing things down. So.
Yeah, that spun out of control. There was, well, I don't know how far I want to get into it. Evidently, CM Punk chimed in response to his online posting.
Well, Tony Khan had pulled all the talent too.
Yes.
As soon as they found out Joey Ryan was a part of it, they pulled all the AEW talent that was scheduled to appear. But it's like, how did these people even get booked? Like, did Joey Ryan use a third party to book all of them? Maybe, maybe not, or whatever it may be. But still, there was the lack of looking into people's backgrounds and looking into what's going on with the show is concerning.
Yeah, I do not remember the particulars, but I believe there was a third party involved in the setup of the show. Although he did make some claim that he wanted his appearance promoted because he wanted everyone to know up front. He didn't want to come in as a surprise appearance. And I suppose it is also fair to, kind of give some kudos to Tony Khan here. This may not have been the hardest business decision, but obviously it was a wise business decision to remove his talent. Although my understanding, he did make a donation to the charity.
But it's so hypocritical. Like, Tony Khan's going to pull his talent from this show and do this, but at the same time, he had absolutely no problem with Joey Ryan coming out there with inflatable penises on his show. You understand? Like, okay, you can tell me that, I hate Joey Ryan, he's this and that, but the proof's in the pudding. Like, I've hated Joey Ryan for years. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing, like, you have to draw a line in the sand, So, like, to me, it's kind of hypocritical for them to all of a sudden, we're the patron saints of wrestling trying to save everything from this horrible guy when you were one of the guys that put him center stage. The reason he has the name he has is because, guys like Tony Khan and AEW and Cody and Pro Wrestling Guerrilla and some of these other people put stock in that and that style that he was doing. So,
all right, let me make as quick and less than graceful transition to any other subject, but there was one other subject, and it's kind of more back on the AEW, and because they're working in relation with Impact, they're at the closing segment of Impact. As a fan, this caught my attention, and I want to let you straighten me out if I understand this incorrectly, but at an upcoming Impact Plus show, I believe is occurring on the day we're recording this show, that they're going to have a title unification match in which Moose, the TNA heavyweight champion, and Rich Swann, the Impact heavyweight champion, are going to unify the two championships. The key to this is they have a working relationship with AEW. And Scott D'Amore, I believe, was out there making this announcement. And they were talking about that whoever won this match would go on to face Kenny Omega at the next pay-per-view, which led, the question in my mind is, it was implied to me that the AEW and Impact TNA combo champion, those two championships would be unified. That did not make a great deal of sense to me.
Well, I don't think it's not unified. It's more like Kenny Omega is going to be like the belt collector.
Okay.
So individually, he's going to be the AEW champion. He's going to be the Impact champion. He's going to be, the AAA champion. All those different titles and things like that. So he'll just have all the titles. The unification would be obviously you unify them and then you have one title to show your unification.
Right.
Like we actually have that here in Pro Wrestling Mid-South. Our title is unified with the old traditional championship wrestling heavyweight title, the NWA Mid-South title, AAW title from a company around here, and things like that. So Pro Wrestling Elite was another title. But those are actually unified into one title. So yeah, this is more of a belt collector situation with them. But I want to get one quick point. We'll get to moving. But you said it's Moose, the TNA heavyweight champion, versus Rich Swann, the Impact heavyweight champion.
Correct.
The problem with this is the word heavyweight.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons we lose credibility in wrestling is because Impact heavyweight champion and Rich Swann's 170 pounds. If he's going to be a heavyweight, if it's going to be a heavyweight title, then it needs to be a heavyweight with it. So those are just little things that we could change in our business to move past that kind of thing. We can get some more credibility back.
And where an invention such as the X division certainly was a wise thing. And thank you for I guess I got on that track because they were unifying their two championships, and then they said that when immediately going to face Kenny Omega, I had unification on my mind, which I thought from the perspective of Anthem or AEW seemed like a incredibly terrible idea, but it's kind of where we are in wrestling that I thought that might be something they were considering.
And it's not completely off the table. We're just speculating, really. But, I mean, I think that's what it's going to be. I think it's going to be, like I said, a belt collector situation where he's just individually all these different champions and carry all the titles out. But, like you said, we're at such a weird point in professional wrestling. They may actually think that's a good idea, that AEW is going to, unify their title with a much, much lower on the rung company than themselves, in order to make themselves seem bigger, and that's not how that works. So...
All right. I suspect our time is running low. I believe we're getting near to the end. If I could quickly slip in one last subject that's a little bit lighter. And there was a memo allegedly released by the WWE this week. Apparently they have banned or outlawed the leg slap and threatened fines for those who fail to follow this edict from the management.
Well, they say that, but I just watched part of NXT the other day, and they were slapping the fuck out of each other still. The thing with this is, and this is what I tell everybody, listen, the leg slap or the chest slap or whatever the case may be, that kind of thing has been a part of professional wrestling for 40 or 50 years. Okay? I've seen it. I can go back to matches where it happened in the 70s and things like that, okay? So it's not that you do it, it's that you do it so frequently. Right? It's you can throw 5 punches, right? But then that 6th one is the slap, right? And that makes the sound, of course, everyone's just, where the hell did that come from? I mean, he must have really tagged him with that one. See what I'm saying? Like, it's part of the suspension of disbelief. But when you sit there and you slap yourself over and over and over again, then everyone can see what's going on, and that's where it's coming from. But if you do it in those those knee-jerk moments, it's so much more effective. And that's kind of what's happened with professional wrestling in general. We've taken everything that's effective and then we multiply it times 100 and expect it to have the same effectiveness, and that's not true.
All right, thank you. All right. Oh, very quickly. Also at the pay-per-view, and unfortunately something that kind of got overshadowed, and that was the debut, the much anticipated debut of this mystery signee for AEW, and that was Christian making his Christian Cage, I suppose I should say, making his AEW debut.
Yeah, I mean, Christian, I love Christian. I think Christian is one of the most underrated, underappreciated in-ring workers of the past 25 years. He's phenomenal. When he was a babyface and he had to put a heel over clean, like his psychology to get to that point to where it didn't hurt him and it made that guy look like $1 million was just a thing of beauty. You know what I mean? Anytime we're going through a situation like that, I tell guys to go watch that. You know what I mean? Because he found a way to do it so beautifully. It was just one of the most beautiful points of storytelling that I've seen. But with that being said, Christian is not a Stone Cold Steve Austin. He's not a Brock Lesnar. He's not a Rock. He's not, he's not that upper echelon of worker that's going to change the direction of a company for you. He's going to give you a lot of great matches. Every main event that I've ever seen Christian Cage in has been knock out of the park great. You know what I mean? I've always got my money's worth with that. But like as far as, eyes on the product, transcending the business, he's not going to do that. And AEW, they try to make it sound like it was a big deal, and it is a big deal, but it's not as big as a deal as it happened. Well, then someone says, well, AEW didn't make a big deal. The internet made a big deal. Well, perception is reality. They said it was this huge deal and is Hall of Fame level, and he is Hall of Fame level, but like it just didn't hold the same way. And if it would have been anyone, Lesnar, Angle, Punk, those three right there would have definitely turned some heads. But it was Christian. Everybody goes, oh, it's Christian. I love Christian, but it was Christian.
All right. Well, very quickly, do you think that perhaps within the span of I guess it was just a week, they introduced Paul White, formerly known as the Big Show, just with a press release or Twitter, just tweeted it out. And is it interesting that maybe they kind of undersold the acquisition of Paul White and potentially oversold the acquisition of Christian Cage?
Yeah, that sounds about right. And that's very indicative of professional wrestling today. Is it's always oversell and under deliver. You understand? Like they're overselling all their importance or what they're going to do, but then they under deliver. Just like the exploding barbed wire cage or whatever. Just sell it for what it is. Sell it for what it is. You could say, hey man, we got a signee coming in, not even I would much rather just seen him come in. You know what I mean? Just come out of nowhere. And then that would have been a bigger shock. But then they got everybody talking about it and they got the buzz going, and then it didn't go where it needed to go. But like Mr. Mark Tipton said, we are definitely over time. We're never going to be exactly 30 minutes. We're always going to be a little over, a little under. I am your host, the Golden Boy Greg Anthony, for my co-host, Mr. Multimedia, Mark Tipton. Thank you and goodbye.